What up guys, Miguel here of YugaTech, and with the release of the value-priced Realme 5 Pro topping at 13,990 pesos, we couldn't stop ourselves from comparing it to our Shandy-bought Redmi Note 8 Pro for its familiar price point. If you guys are interested to see how these two phones fare against each other, stick around and find out. Alright, starting with design. The Realme 5 Pro sports a polycarbonate back with some geometric gradient design that I think looks like shattered glass when I look at it too long. Of course, that's just my opinion, and design is the most subjective part of this comparison after all. The Redmi Note 8 Pro, on the other hand, gets a glass back with Gorilla Glass 5 protection. Overall, all of us here in the office agree that it does look quite classy, but we find it to be a bit chunky in the hands or in our pockets. I think it's also worth mentioning that the Redmi Note 8 Pro feels noticeably heavier when holding both devices. That's a 16-gram weight difference for those of you wondering. At the back of both devices, you can find their main cameras. Both of these devices get quad camera setups as well, with the Realme 5 Pro sensors packed in one module, stacked vertically and placed on the upper left corner with the LED flash to its right. The Redmi Note 8 Pro only has 3 of its sensors in the main camera module, also stacked vertically, but this time placed on the upper center, with the LED flash and macro sensor right beside it. Both devices also have rear-mounted fingerprint scanners. The 5 Pros is placed in the center, leveled between the last 2 camera sensors, while the Note 8 Pros is right below the camera module, and in a way, part of it. In front, both devices utilize a dewdrop notch for their selfie camera placements, and unlike the Realme 5 Pro, the Redmi Note 8 Pro still has an LED notification light hidden in the earpiece. For buttons and ports, starting up top, we get a noise-cancelling mic for speakerphone on both devices, with an additional IR blaster for the Redmi Note 8 Pro. Situated on the left side of both devices is the dual SIM card tray. Both phones get support for expandable storage. That's a dedicated slot for the Realme and a hybrid slot for the Redmi. Also found here is the Realme 5 Pro's volume rocker. On the right are both devices' power button. The Redmi Note 8 Pro's volume rocker is here as well. Lastly, at the bottom, we have both devices' 3.5mm audio jack, noise-cancelling mic for regular calls, single downward-firing speaker, and a USB Type-C port. So overall, for design and build, I do like how both devices are pretty much neck and neck with each other in terms of ports and stuff. I find it interesting that the Redmi Note 8 Pro still has those niche to now more novelty-like features like the IR blaster and LED notification light. But of course, Realme would love to cut costs and only keep the essentials intact. Although if I just listen to my gut, I do like the more slightly heavier, solid-feeling Redmi Note 8 Pro over the plastic-build Realme 5 Pro. For display, the Realme 5 Pro utilizes a 6.3-inch Full HD Plus IPS LCD panel with a resolution of 2340 by 1080 and a pixel density of 409 pixels per inch. The Redmi Note 8 Pro gets a slightly bigger 6.53-inch Full HD Plus IPS LCD display with a resolution of 2340 by 1080 as well, but with a lower pixel density of 395 pixels per inch. And honestly, you won't really notice the difference in pixel density. Both devices handle media consumption very well. Colors feel a bit on the vibrant side with the Realme and a little more accurate on the Redmi. Viewing under direct sunlight also wasn't much of a problem for both these IPS LCD panels. For display protection, the Realme 5 Pro gets Gorilla Glass 3 Plus, while the Redmi Note 8 Pro, just like the back, gets Gorilla Glass 5. And with that notion, I'm giving it to the Redmi Note 8 Pro for the extra display protection. For audio quality from those single downward firing speakers, they both aren't the best single speakers in the market, but they can both get pretty loud, with the lows a bit better on the Redmi. Either way, I personally usually end up covering them with my palm, which is why I recommend users with that problem who don't want to change how they hold their phones take advantage of that headphone jack while it's still here. Checking out performance now. For hardware, under the hood of the Realme 5 Pro is a Qualcomm Snapdragon 712 chipset with an Adreno 616 GPU. The Redmi Note 8 Pro utilizes the MediaTek Helio G90T coupled with a Mali G76 MC4 GPU. For configurations, officially in our local market, the Realme 5 Pro is available in either 4 or 8 gigs of RAM with 128 gigs of internal storage. Our Redmi Note 8 Pro was bought from Shandy, and the last time we were there, they only had the 6 gig RAM variants available with either 64 or 128 gigs of internal storage. For software, both devices get Android 9 Pie out of the box with both manufacturers' skin on top. That's ColorOS 6 for Realme and MIUI for the Redmi. Either way, I do believe that operating systems can boil down to personal preference, just like design. So for me, I'm more comfortable on MIUI over ColorOS, but it's safe to say that both have good practical features and customization. It's just, for me, MIUI feels a little bit more polished in comparison. Does it bother me that there isn't an app drawer? Surprisingly, it doesn't, but I would generally prefer it. When it comes to benchmarks, the Realme 5 Pro fares okay against the Redmi Note 8 Pro. It didn't beat it, but it can keep up. Gaming on both these devices can cause their back panels to warm up, but never to a point where it's too uncomfortable. Alright, overall for performance, we're going to have to give it to the Redmi Note 8 Pro once again. This time for the relatively better benchmark scores, but to be fair, the Realme 5 Pro didn't perform poorly, mind you. Checking out them batteries, the Realme 5 Pro is powered by a 4035 mAh cell, while the Redmi Note 8 Pro gets a 4500 mAh one. Both devices get fast charging support, that's 18W fast charging for the Redmi and 20W VOOC 3 for the Realme. In our standard video loop test, which involves the phone's display and volume set to 50%, airplane mode turned on, and with the headphones plugged in, the Realme 5 Pro got a total of 20 hours and 30 minutes of playback, while the Redmi Note 8 Pro totaled at 17 hours and 10 minutes. Of course, this test doesn't exactly translate well to real-world use, but I can say they both lasted surprisingly longer than we expected them to. So for battery, we obviously have to give it to the Realme 5 Pro for its better score. That's great. For security, we get face unlock and fingerprint scanners on both devices. They're both fairly quick for both unlocking options. Of course, the face unlock will fare best in good lighting conditions, and both devices' rear-mounted fingerprint scanners are faster and definitely more secure if you ask me. The Realme 5 Pro's face unlock is also quite faster than the Redmi's, as it recognizes the user's face very quick even when seeing angles of your face you wouldn't think it would register with. So yeah. For security, it's going to be a tie. Checking out the cameras now. Both devices utilize quad camera setups at the rear. The Realme 5 Pros is composed of a 48 megapixel main, an 8 megapixel ultra wide, a 2 megapixel macro lens, and a 2 megapixel depth sensor. The Redmi Note 8 Pro features a 64 megapixel main shooter, an 8 megapixel ultra wide, a 2 megapixel depth sensor, and a 2 megapixel macro lens. On the front facing side of things, in both devices' notches, you can find a 16 megapixel shooter for the Realme and a 20 megapixel one for the Redmi. Checking out some photo samples now. As you can see throughout all our shots here, both phones in their default photo modes seem to produce very comparable image quality. We can also observe the difference in color reproduction as well as the overall difference in post-processing. The Redmi Note 8 Pro comes off with a bit more saturation, and realistically, both devices don't have the most faithful color reproduction as well. I do think the Note 8 Pro is a bit more accurate though. For dynamic range, they're both as good in terms of cityscapes. Next up, we're using the 48 megapixel mode on the Realme and 64 on the Redmi. In this shot, first impressions, the Realme's shot feels a little bit too over-sharpened, but that may just be me nitpicking. The Redmi's photo is more color accurate and you will be able to crop a bit more due to those extra pixels. We can crop into the DMCI home sign, and you guys should notice the Realme's shot might not be as clear as the Redmi's, but it's still very much readable. In this next shot, I was surprised with the results. I tapped to expose for the foreground, and the Realme was able to find a good overall balance with the background. The Redmi blew out the highlights in the back, so I guess against harsh backlighting, the Realme fares better in their respective 48 and 64 megapixel modes. Moving on to macro, which both these camera setups include, I'll be frank with this one, the Redmi's is better. You can get much closer to your subject, and users also get the bonus of being able to record video on this sensor. For night mode, we're looking at a reference shot right now taken on the default photo mode, and now this is night mode. Honestly, this is a tough one. I've never seen two night modes perform so similar with each other. I mean, even in the reference shot, they looked similar. I think I can give slightly more points to the Realme due to the Redmi having a tad bit more overexposed highlights. But again, they're so similar, you'd really have to look up close to see that difference. Now, none of these cameras have a telephoto lens packed in, but we do get the more useful ultra-wide and some digital zooms. Here's what they look like in suboptimal lighting conditions. For portrait mode, the Realme 5 Pro seems to have more accurate colors compared to the Redmi Note 8 Pro's shot that seems to have what I can describe as a warmer, more dramatic type of post-processing. Nonetheless, subject background separation seems pretty much on par. For portrait selfies, same observations as the rear. Subject background separation for group photos do appear a little bit better on the Realme device though. Lastly, looking at some default selfies now, and the only notable difference I see that I haven't said already are those highlights. The Realme 5 Pro tends to blow out the highlights on the front-facing camera, and obviously, I am not a fan. Overall, for cameras in this case, I want to say it's a tie, but what you all didn't see from these samples was the actual usage. I noticed that the Redmi Note 8 Pro captures an image faster than the Realme 5 Pro. I also noticed that at times, I have to hold the Realme still for a second after taking a shot, just to be sure my subjects are in focus. And and if you ask me, it's kind of a hassle. So I'm giving this one to the Redmi Note 8 Pro. Okay, before we conclude this comparison, we gotta talk about price. The Realme 5 Pro starts at 11,990 pesos for the 4 gigs of RAM variant and 13,990 pesos for the 8 gigabytes of RAM. Both configurations are paired up with 128 gigs of internal storage. Our Redmi Note 8 Pro was bought from a shop called Shandi, and last time we checked, they only had 6 gig RAM variants available. That's 13,200 for the 64 gigs of internal storage and 14,700 for the 128 gigs. Now clearly, the Realme device is cheaper, but if you think about it, the Redmi Note 8 Pro practically won this comparison. But I cannot recommend it just yet because of one thing: that China ROM. Honestly, I wouldn't want to go through the hassle of dealing with it, which is why I would opt for the Realme 5 Pro. But if you guys can wait a little bit, I believe the global ROM should be coming to our shores soon. Though I cannot assure you guys that the pricing will be as good as this version. So, what do you guys think of this smartphone comparison? Realme 5 Pro or the Redmi Note 8 Pro? Let us know in the comment section below, and if you enjoyed this video or found it helpful, be sure to smack that like button, subscribe to our YouTube channel, and hit that bell icon so you get notified of future uploads. Be sure to visit YugaTech.com for the latest tech news and reviews. Again, this has been Miguel, and I'll see you in the next one.